Welcome back, Hooligans, once again for another riveting episode of Movie Howl. My name is Joe, joined as always by my just wonderful and magnanimous co-host Ryan. We're here to do another movie for you. This one's going to be more of a documentary style, not documentary, autobiographical, you could say, movie. This is something I picked out. I just happened to catch it as something that popped up on HBO Max, and it's like, I started watching it one morning before work, and I got half hour, 45 minutes into it, and was like, we need to do this. And that movie is Borg vs. McEnroe. Now, if you don't know anything about any of this, this is a sports movie. Follows two very star tennis pros, Bjorn Borg and John McEnroe. Bjorn Borg is a Swedish player. McEnroe is a good old American boy. And I mean, I knew. I'd heard of both of them, and I know who McEnroe is, but they were certainly before our time. So when this was going on, it would have been nothing that we paid attention to. But at the time, it was kind of a big deal, and I thought this was the way the director chose to set this up and play out the whole thing. I thought was very intriguing. One thing I will say about this movie, I'm just going to say this from almost the outset, not quite in the very beginning, but 30 to 45 minutes into this, for at least I'll say the second half of the movie, maybe more than that, but I was anxious the whole time. And it wasn't just, like the last scene, which is the big showdown between Borg and McEnroe in a Wimbledon final. You could probably go to YouTube and watch the actual match if, it was something that you felt like doing, if you were wanted to see how that played out. But for a majority, I want to say, of this movie, just because of the background of the two involved and everything that's going on, and I was just kind of anxious the whole time and on edge. And I feel like that was a deliberate choice by the director to do that in a manner that would make the audience feel that way. And I would have to commend them for that. It was really well done in that way. And I enjoyed it quite a bit because of that. It was just for that. I thought it was very good. What do you think of this movie, Ryan? You had to ask me today. What was that movie we're watching? I didn't write that shit down. So what are we watching?
Yeah, I thought I had it written down, but I didn't. I liked it. I'll come right out and say that. Overly simplistic. It's not a super complicated story or a very long story. Like, I saw that it was a relatively short movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree with you. It made me nervous and anxious pretty much.
Yeah.
Like most of the way through it. It was just very tense, like deliberately paced in a way that makes you tense, focuses on certain reactions and facial expressions in a way that amplifies that feeling. The way everything's framed and shot is really well done, I feel like. And I definitely did not know who these guys were. And I think they did a really good job.
As the tennis players?
Yeah. But I think they did a really good job of characterizing them and making them feel like real people all the way through. Like, they introduced both of them in a way where, like, here's what they are today, like today of the movie. And then kind of flesh them out after the fact without having to say too much, without having to tell you, McEnroe, he's a bit of a hothead, and Borg, he's whatever he is. He's very stoic or whatever. I like that they did the show, don't tell. Like, they do talk about McEnroe's behavior. They talk about Borg's behavior. They talk about him being a gentleman, McEnroe being a rebel, stuff like that. But they never, beat you over the head with it.
Mm-hmm.
And they do a really good job of, stretching out this story in a way that makes sense. Like, it fleshes out their background, like their competitive nature, kind of where they each came from, and a little bit even of, their motivation. Like, Borg is just like a competitive kid and wanted to do it seemingly for his own sake. And McEnroe seemingly wants to do it for his father. I kind of got from one of the flashbacks that maybe his dad is the one kind of who's proud of him for it and kind of pushing him forward. And that made him more competitive than he might have otherwise been, but it shows how similar they are. how
Mm-hmm.
McEnroe is kind of now where Borg was, at some point during his journey. And I don't know, I found it weirdly kind of inspiring again. It reminded me a lot of Whiplash pretty much the whole way through. That's probably where I was trying to go earlier that I kind of lost my way. But it reminded me a lot of Whiplash. Just the way, it's this competitive thing. Can he do it? Can he not? He's going for this like really tough goal. He's going to break a
Mm-hmm.
record. And we don't know if he's going to be able to do it or not. And it was one of those things where it's a historical, like a real true historic event. And it was so hard to not Google it. It was very difficult for me to resist just, hey, G word, who won the 1980 Wimbledon, like whatever it was supposed to be, and just have it tell me. But it was one of these things where it's like, it's not a good guy versus a bad guy. It's people versus people.
Mm-hmm.
And who wins is not up to like who the movie is setting us up to root for. It's whoever
Yeah,
actually won.
absolutely. Which that's a nice part about things like this, whether you have the Miracle on Ice, this
Mm-hmm.
whatever different sports story you want to be. Like it doesn't matter how you feel about whatever individual. It's just going to play out the way it played out. And
Yeah, I'm sure
I,
there's embellishment, but
mm,
right.
and I did question how much of what you saw in the movie was accurate versus what wasn't, because these are people who are alive, so you can talk to them about it. You can get their opinions on how it was, how their childhoods were. I'm sure things were written about them at the time, articles you could go back and look at. They tried to in this movie, and probably because it's what was happening in real life at the time, play McEnroe up as the bad guy, as the villain,
Mm-hmm.
and just because of that's the way he did it, the yelling at the refs and cursing and throwing fits, and just because he's that competitive, that wasn't something that anybody had ever seen in tennis before.
Yeah, I
Tennis,
like
they
the.
they
I was just gonna say I really like the scene where he's being interviewed and they keep talking about his conduct,
mhm.
and he's like, "What about tennis? Do you have any questions about tennis?" Like, and then he's saying, like, "I behave the way I do because I leave everything out there on the court. Like, you guys don't understand because you don't do this."
Yeah, that I thought it was very interesting how the way the two men are when they face off at the end of the movie, who they're known to be, is very dissimilar almost from how they started as kids. What it shows you them growing up. And just as a quick little bit of trivia, the kid who played young Bjorn Borg in the movie, that's his actual son.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's his for real son. I just happened to IMDb, did a little bit of trivia. I'm like, oh, well, that's cool to have a little note like that. But it was really interesting for me to see. That's what I think hooked me in the beginning when I first decided, oh, I want to do this as a movie, because it talks about, before it does any background on anybody, before it goes back to them being kids, it shows how Borg is a machine, and he's reserved, no emotion. He just goes out and gets the job done and beats you. And McEnroe, the very first scene of McEnroe, F bomb. First thing, first words out of his mouth, drops the F bomb. He's on the court. He's yelling at the ref. And I've always liked John McEnroe, Johnny Mac. I always liked him. I liked the explosiveness. I liked just the personality behind it. I like that. I think it's fun to watch. It makes for good entertainment. But from the outset of this movie starts out, and I know you've in the past had problems with movies that start out and make you read a bunch of text.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, though, in this case, I was glad they did it for the fact that I know nothing about this. I know no background on these guys. I mean, I know a little bit of background on McEnroe in the fact that I knew he was a hothead and yelled at people and stuff. That he's done, cameo roles in movies and different things, playing that up. But realistically, I knew nothing about these two. I knew they were tennis players. That's it, much as I knew. So I did enjoy that, and it's just, I thought the movie did a really, or I say the director did a really good job in this, or the writers, however you want to look at it, about showing what sort of, and show don't tell, what sort of pressure Borg is under. Talk about the youngest to win a Wimbledon ever. He's got four in a row, and that he would be the youngest person to ever win, maybe the first to ever win five in a row. I don't know. Certainly the
I think
youngest
that
to
was
ever
it.
win five in a row, which is an amazing. That's a ridiculous accomplishment. To win it once is harder than most people can possibly realize, let alone to do it consecutively. It's so difficult. And just without telling us a whole lot, just showing as the movie plays out, just the things that happen, how these two react to the world around them as the world is reacting to them. It did a really masterful job. Besides what we mentioned earlier of building up tension, just showing you the amount of pressure. Then I say Borg, both of them really, but not so much McEnroe. McEnroe's the one that he has the opportunity to knock the giant down off the pedestal, take him down. But everybody wants to beat the best. And it's just the pressure and on top of pressure to continue to win and just uh my wife was just watching some little quick videos, and one was some gymnast routine and doing some music, doing their all their flippy spinny stuff, and doing a bunch of spreadies and to the gods and all that stuff. But she mentioned the fact that they make it look easy. And I agreed. The people who do that kind of stuff, the professionals, when you see them doing whatever it is they do, they make it, it's like watching Usain Bolt run. He just makes it look effortless. It's not. None of that stuff is. It takes so much hard work and dedication. It's insane. And yet people put this amount of pressure on these individuals to perform and to continue to win and succeed. And I can't even imagine that kind of pressure. It's got to be insane. And to do it to somebody who he's he's 24. One of the things that
Right.
struck me towards towards the end of the movie. So he's walking with, I guess, his coach, you could call him, uh Stellan Skarsgård.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, his character, he's great. I mean, he's great in basically everything that he does. They're walking to go to the final match versus him versus McEnroe, and I'm struck by the fact that, I mean, he's not a kid, but he's only 24. And when you have somebody who's 35 and 40 and 50, and you think back to what you were at 24 and how little you you knew, and how you didn't maybe feel like a full adult yet, even though you were legally well into your adulthood. It's so much, and it just struck me just looking at a young man who could get to that point and try to just block everything out and go for it. And not one time was there, and you see a lot in, I think, sports movies, of just go out there and just have a good time. Just this should be, because you originally, he played tennis to have fun, right? That's He wanted to be the best from as a kid. When Skarsgård's character is talking to him as he's a young man, he picks him up. He thinks he has some potential. What he's like, don't tell me the answer that they've told you to tell me. What do you want? I want to be the best. In Sweden? No, in the world. And it's some people have that, most people don't. Most people just don't have that sort of drive. Only certain people are going to be able to be a Bjorn Borg or a Michael Jordan level competitor, who that's all they want. That's all they're considering. They're out before everybody else. They stay later than all the rest of them because that's it. That is encompasses their entire life. And this movie did a very good job of showing just the full, from a very early video of Bjorn Borg just hitting a ball against a garage door all the way up through the Wimbledon championship. It was a very good movie with him and McEnroe. McEnroe as a young kid, all the way up through adulthood, just showing us their lives. And that's what this an autobiographical thing's supposed to be about. Showing us more than just it. This movie was about more than just their rivalry. It was about more than just tennis. It was about these two men. And whereas I would say the movie really did center around Borg, with McEnroe kind of taking that back seat, it it was just a really enjoyable, fun thing to watch, and I just it invested me. It really hooked me from the beginning. It invested me, and then as you and I both said, through probably a little bit before, more than halfway through this movie, it's just tense, and you're nervous and you're anxious, and it's not just because they're trying to battle out in this final match. It's just the way that it is set up and filmed and acted and scripted. It's really well done. That's kudos to the people who made this movie because they did a really exceptional job making you feel what they wanted you to feel.
Yeah. I really like some of the points in it. I'm kind of going to go back to the minutia of it, but I really like how they get in that car and the coach is driving and you see Bjorn's hand like touch the seat,
Mm-hmm.
and then he like holds his fiance or his wife's his fiance's hand, I guess.
Beyonce, yeah.
And he's like, "This isn't the same car." He's like, "No, it's the same car." And he's like, "No, the upholstery's wrong or whatever." And the guy's like, "Ah, shit. All right, I'll go talk to him. Like, I'll see what's going on." Like, I like that they did that way before we get the explanation between that party guy and
Mm-hmm.
McEnroe in Club 54 or Studio 54 or whatever the place
Yeah.
was, where he's saying like they lay out like 50 tennis rackets and they do this, and then he makes it really cold in his apartment so his heart rate is low, and then he rents the same car every year and his parents are only allowed to come once every 2 years and they have to wear the same clothes the whole time, and all these like weird sports superstitions that we all hear about. It's like the rally beard, like you stop shaving when you're on a roll or whatever. It's stuff
Right,
like
right.
that.
Yeah, yeah.
Like it's prevalent in pretty much every sport.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that they kind of set that up. They just showed us that he had, some peculiarities about him. I really like. I was a little bit tense from almost the first scene where it's showing Borg in his house, like in his apartment, and he's like looking down like 20 stories. He's looking at this pool,
Right?
and then he
In
starts like
Monaco.
leaning. Yeah, and then he's like leaning over the railing a little bit, and then he starts doing these like weird like push up things on that railing. It's like, all right, that's a little tense. I was like, is he gonna just try to jump? Is he gonna do a get him to the Greek and try to jump into the pool from like on the roof? Do
Oh,
you
that
remember
would
that?
be, yeah,
That'd be bad.
unadvisable from that height.
Yes. Yeah, it was a really good movie. There wasn't a ton to cover, but they did everything really well. I feel like they showed each of their approaches. They were very different, and it showed that each of them had respect for each other. I really enjoyed. Uh, I mean, just a lot of the little interactions and the looks between them when they're around each other. Um, I don't know. It's a really interesting story that I didn't know anything about before. I
Mm-hmm.
have near no interest in tennis, so and what I enjoyed most was the uh, mid-credit teaser for Kevin Federer.
What?
I'm, I'm joking. There's always the X. Remember at the end of Kingsman or the King's Man, they tease like Hitler as a big
Oh
bad
my
coming up
gosh.
after World War One.
So do you
I was
mean
gonna say they.
Roger Federer?
Is it Roger Federer?
Yes.
All right. Is there
Yeah.
a Kevin Federer?
That's why I was confused. I'm like, what? Yeah.
Kevin
I would say,
Federer. Oh yeah, it does autocorrect to Roger.
yeah.
That shows how much I know. I was gonna say Serena. They tease Serena, but I was like, no, because
Yeah. This
Serena's
was.
later, so they'd probably have Federer and then Serena.
There you go. They could have teased Andre Agassi.
Yeah, yeah. There you go.
He was on the scene for a while. There was I was waiting in this movie as I'm watching it because you see Borg as a boy and he's just like McEnroe is as an adult.
Yeah.
He's a hothead. He's yelling at the refs. He's so invested in what's going on. It's just like when McEnroe's in that interview. He's like, "We can talk about tennis." It's like I put everything out there. It's all of it is there. I mean, that's why he's like that because he's giving everything he's got for the game, and that's the way Borg was as a boy, as this young man. And I was waiting for that transition. Like, when's it going to happen? When's he going to have the
Mm-hmm.
conversation with his coach, and he's going to change? Because it obviously had to be at some point. And it was, it comes to the point in the movie where that does come about, that does happen, And it just reminded me of conversations I've had with my kids when I try to talk to them, like my son, who's I I see a lot of myself in him. Like I'm like, oh, that's me as a kid. There's a just a kind of a big difference is both him and I, as the age he is, and when I was that age, we were very emotional, very emotion driven. Yet the difference between him and I is I was tough. Like I didn't take crap from anybody. I'd never back down from a fight. I didn't care. I was like, I'm not taking garbage from not doing it. He's not quite like that. So he's got a tough road ahead of him. I'm sure he'll end up being
Hmm.
fine, eventually. But I've talked to him about, and both all of my kids, things are going to happen to you in your life that you have zero control over. Even things you do have control over, but things are going to happen to you, and you are going to feel about them. You're going to have your whatever emotional reaction you have. You're going to feel however you feel about it. You can't help that. You can help how you react outwardly to whatever you're feeling. You can control yourself. And that's really what it came down to with the coach talking to a young Borg, that instead of doing what you do, put it into your next swing, your next forehand, your next backhand, put it into that, channel it, and apparently by doing that, he was able to win Wimbledon 5 times in a row. Like
Yeah.
he went and did it, and it's an amazing story. Even if you're not like, I don't care about tennis. I'm not a huge sports person. I liked it for a little while at one point. I kind of followed and watched ESPN and things, but that was because the group that I was hanging around at that point in the martial arts school that I was in, they all talked about it all the time. They always watched ESPN. They knew everything was going on. So I'm like, well, I better watch some sports so I'm not just lost as they're all talking about this. But
Hmm.
just this was it was really really well done in showing what it was like for these two men, showing what it was like for Borg to go through this, and showing what it was like for McEnroe to go through it. And it did a really fantastic job of taking us, the viewer, on that journey.
Right. And I the only kind of nitpick I had about it as I was watching it was the age of the actors, because the guy who played Borg was, just looking at his age now. This came out in 2017. He was like 38, playing a 24-year-old,
Whew.
and Shia LaBeouf would have been 31, playing like a 21-ish-year-old, something like
Yeah,
that.
probably something like that.
Like 19, between 19 and 21, I would say. I don't know exactly. They show him drinking, but I don't know if the drinking age was 18 back then. It might have been.
Oh
Or
yeah,
if you're
yeah,
like a
very
big
true.
tennis star, maybe it doesn't even apply
Uh-huh.
to you. But then when they show the little clips, and they have like this reel of, photos of the real people and some of the real events that they were trying to replicate, and they really do look like them, like a lot. It's eerie in the case of Borg how much the actor looked like
Yeah,
him.
I agreed. There was the casting on this was well done.
Hmm.
Like regardless of age, I think
Yeah,
you're
so it's
right
hard
when
to.
they
Yeah,
start
it's
showing that reel at the end. One of the things that I liked about this that I realized later on, halfway ish through the movie, is I come to realize that the entire encompassing this movie encompasses a lifespan for these two men up to the point of the championship in Wimbledon, from young men to adults playing in this young adults, but playing in this match, and everything they show, it's a back and forth flashbacks and back to normal time, but it's all taking place surrounding that Wimbledon match. The beginning of it is talking about the match coming up and leading up to it, but all of it is the matches that they're playing early on, the early rounds of Wimbledon, beating the opponents to be able to make it to the final bracket with Borg and McEnroe, that they're going to be the ones who clash at the end. And it was interesting to watch. Uh, I'm like, oh, this is just progressing to that. And to that point, the tennis match between those two at the end, that was beastly. Like,
yeah,
that was something else. I couldn't even imagine going to that and watching that happen live. The set point, break point, match point, the back and forth they had. where McEnroe doesn't give up and he keeps fighting and ties everything up to go into the final set to see who's going to win it all. Oh, that was something else. And I mean, the movie was tense the whole time, but that was tense in the way you expected it to be. But it felt like something you would watch if this was fiction.
Yeah.
Like that's what they would have happen to build it up even more and to really build the stakes. But that's what happened. They're not gonna the way that it went in the final match in this movie was just how it went in real life. And it just goes to show, like has been said for many a moon at this point, truth is always stranger than fiction. Always has been, always will be. And sometimes the things that we watch, the things that people do and are capable of, are just amazing. And it's a fun ride to sit and be able to watch the ones who can do this battle it out to see who's the best. Especially when you're talking about something like this, not a team. It's not a team sport. This is you versus him, and there's no excuses. There's no he let me down. Oh, my teammate didn't catch the ball or throw it far enough, or none of that. It's mano e mano, and it's just a whole different thing than a team sport is. It's really something to watch, and this was that. This was something to watch as well, and I was glad. Ended up being very glad that I recommended it. I'm glad that you enjoyed it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about Ken Robinson, or
No idea.
Dr. Sir Ken Robinson, since he has multiple like titles and stuff that you're supposed to put around his name. But he's done like TED Talks and he's written books that I've read, and he's done all this stuff. But he wrote a book called The Element about like how people found the thing that they were passionate about, like how the Beatles started doing what they were doing, how like Matt Groening or whatever his name, however you're supposed to pronounce his name, started doing The Simpsons and stuff like that.
Sure.
And he talked about meeting somebody when he was younger who was like a piano player. He was like in some band, and he was talking to the guy, and he's like, "Oh, I'd love to do that." And the guy was like, "No, you wouldn't." And he said that he was very taken aback by that. And he's like, "No, I'm pretty sure I'm an expert in my opinions. Like, I think I would like to do that." And the guy was like, "It's so much work, and it's something that if you're not doing it now, it's probably not something you're into enough to put that much work into. Like, when you have a passion for something enough to drive you to be really good at it."
Yeah.
And I was kind of thinking about that throughout this. Like, I cannot imagine, sad as it may seem, being passionate enough about anything to get to that kind of level. Like, I can't imagine the drive, the inability to accept loss, or even like the possibility of loss. I mean, I get that they put up that Borg is, he's the target for everybody. It's like you were saying, but he's just so afraid of losing.
Mm-hmm.
The fear of loss that both of them have, because they've both been driven to this point where the only place good enough, and they say it a couple times, the only place good enough is first place.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting mindset to try to imagine. And it actually reminds me, there's one more thing that it kind of reminded me of as we were talking, which is silly. It's Assassin's Creed Valhalla. There's a side mission that's like totally just like a chance encounter. You can find these little kids, and they keep talking about this wallop, and your guy's like, what is a wallop? I don't know what you're talking about. And their grandpa comes out, and your character's like, what is this wallop? Like, I don't understand. And it turns out that this guy has a punch that just like nobody can withstand, and he like wins every fight he's in, and he doesn't want to fight you. He's like, I'm so tired of fighting. I'm so tired of fighting. I'm so tired of winning. Like, you're not going to enjoy this. I'm not going to enjoy this. But you can insist. And it took me a couple tries to beat him, but I beat him. And when you do, he's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, it's finally over, because he's not the one at the top anymore. He's no longer the one that's unbeaten. And there's even a point he's like, hey, it's this thing that happens in the game a lot where people will be like, here's a key to my house. Go take some shit. So he gives you a key to his house. And one of the things you can find in there is like letters from like all these other characters in the game who are all challenging him to fights, because he's the one at the top. He's the one that they all want to beat. And it's just really interesting how it relates to, what they were talking about, that it's loneliest when you're the one at the very top because everybody's gunning for you.
When you first started saying that, said something silly, and the first thing my mind thought of was, "If you're not first, you're last, baby. First or last, Ricky Bobby." That's kind of where
I
I
thought
thought
you
that
were
was going.
gonna see. You should have expected a Green Arrow reference.
Oh,
I
can't.
haven't
I
done it in
mean,
a while.
you haven't done it in a while. But this was yeah, I was glad that I recommended this, and you brought it up earlier, but I wanted to state one of my favorite, I think, parts about this was the very end of it, when it's over and both Borg and McEnroe are leaving. They're gonna fly out, and they both happen to be in the airport, and they see each other, and they go and they have this interaction, and you see the interaction, and it's just these two guys talking, and they don't hate each other. They don't view the other person as a villain. They're just rivals. And then you
Right.
come to find out through the credits later on, when it's showing the real life pictures of these two, and it's giving some background, some things, that they end up becoming friends later on in life, and that Borg ended up being the best man at McEnroe's wedding, which I thought was really cool. But even before that, and that was really neat, finding out some real life background on stuff like that is really fun, and I enjoy it. But just watching those two interact and showing that it's not it's not I hate you. That's what we're in right now. That's what today is if you're on the
Mm.
other side of something as me, I hate you. And you don't have to. I can want to beat you more than anything in the world. It can be my number one goal, but that doesn't mean I have to hate you. And that was maybe my favorite thing about this entire movie. That little interaction at the end where it's just two men who are the most passionate about this thing that they can do, who will face off again in the future. They will have more matches together. I believe it said in the trivia they ended up having 14 matches against each one another throughout the course of their careers, and they each won 7 of them.
Mm.
So it was to see that, to know that that can be a thing. It's really nice in today's climate, compared to all the hate and vitriol especially that goes around the internet and everything right now. So that was really nice. It might have been my favorite part of the entire film, but I just can't say enough about how it was done, what it made me feel, and not in a Rocky sort of way. Like you're rooting for this guy the whole time, and they're overcoming so many odds in order to come out on top at the end. It wasn't one of those. It
Yeah.
wasn't that kind of story, but everything that made you feel, the way the director shot it and handled it was well done. It was acted very well. I liked a lot of it, and I'd like to give a little shout out to one of the early scenes with Borg when he goes into that coffee shop and he's having that conversation with the coffee shop guy. That was really nice. That was just a nice little interaction that was. It helped, I think, when I was talking about showing the amount of pressure that Borg was under. It was a nice little moment in the movie, and this movie had several nice moments. I thought, and a lot of tense moments, and a lot of just hard to take things that went on. One that, I mean, you sent me a text about it and mentioned it. Might be trigger warnings that we need to put up in this movie for certain weak stomached individuals, so to speak. But this was fun. I enjoyed it. It was tense, made me anxious. It was like a roller coaster. But this was one I'm glad that I picked out. This worked out well. It's gonna have to be a watch. I'm calling it a watch, Halligan. This is a watch from Joe.
Definitely a watch. Yeah. I don't know where you're gonna get it. It's probably not enough to get an HBO Max subscription just by itself, but I think you can probably rent it or buy it through Google Play or
Oh, I'm sure.
iTunes or whatever else.
Probably. I mean, I'm not sure. I
But
haven't looked it
definitely,
up, but it seems feasible.
or it might even be at your local library. We haven't mentioned the library in a while. Library is a great source for free movie rentals.
Absolutely. They'd love to have you come walking in their doors. Go for it. All right, Ryan, any last
All right,
thoughts?
man. No, no, that is it. That was it was another movie like Whiplash that I didn't know I needed to watch.
Yeah, I didn't think about it that way, but I think you're right. I think it took you on a journey the way Whiplash did, That was a good analogy to put with it. This was good. I enjoyed it. So that's it for me. That's it for Ryan. Ryan, where can they reach out to us if any of you Halligans would so choose? You can do it. Where would that be?
If they are so inclined, they can reach out by email, moviehowl@gmail.com, or on Twitter, where we announce our new episodes, which is @moviehowl.
That's right. Once again, thank you so much for listening, Halligans. This wasn't another one that wasn't super long, which is the same as I believe the last one that we just did. Not super long, fun movies to watch. Go out, watch some movies, take some time, sit down with some friends, some family, enjoy yourself. Take a little time to, spend some time with people and maybe watch something that you wouldn't normally think to sit down and watch. You might end up being surprised.